Hello, my name is Craig Peterson, and I'm an online graduate student with Liberty University, and this is my Interpersonal Communication Project for Human Service Course 508. Next slide. The flow of this project will follow this outline. I will briefly introduce myself. I will share what is my overarching goal. I will define and enlarge my conversation as it relates to me. I will examine how my background and behavioral blend has influenced my conversation and relationship, both in a positive and negative way. I will identify potential barriers in my interpersonal context and answer the question of how do I plan to deal with these barriers. I will then identify and provide solutions to noise pollution, both internal and external. I will share my action plan to make my personal communication goals a reality, and then I will conclude this presentation. Next slide. Introduction. Again, my name is Craig Peterson. I was born in Gary, Indiana. I currently live in Fayetteville, Georgia, which is outside of Atlanta, Georgia. I've been married 12 years to my wonderful and lovely wife, Jennifer. We serve as leaders in our church's community group fellowship ministry, which is a home-based informal Bible study group that meets once a month. We meet in our home. We have one son, Charles, who lives in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I am an ex-military person. I served in the Air Force. I obtained a Bachelor's of Science in Business and Management from the University of Maryland while serving in the Air Force. And my current pursuit is to obtain a master's degree in human services from Liberty University. Next slide. My overarching goal is to fulfill the call of leadership that God has placed on my life. I believe an effective leader is an effective communicator. Applying the techniques of interpersonal communication studied in these course materials, my hope is to mature in conversations that make meaning with the objective to win many to Christ. Next slide. Defining my personal steps to enlarging my conversation. The two key things that I feel I must do to enlarge my conversation is to place empathy, warmth, and genuineness at the heart of every aspect of my communication process, and to have more faith in God's ability to sustain me than fear that people will hurt me if I fully engage my person in the inhale and exhale process. Next slide. Defining behavioral blend. Carbonell defines behavioral blend as the description of specific personality traits and behaviors from a private and public perspective, when individuals are either in their home environments or in settings among friends and relatives. Stewart parallels this with features of the personal, which he comprises the 5 qualities or characteristics that distinguish us from others. These qualities or characteristics are uniqueness, the unmeasurables, responsiveness, reflectiveness, and adjustability. This is like a personality gumbo. In regular gumbo, you have a lot of different foods that make up the recipe. And as you meet and interact with people will experience and taste different aspects of your personality. Next slide. The purpose of the behavioral blend. Carbonell devised the DISC model of human behavior. Through this model, we are able to understand the personality patterns in order to improve relationships. The 4 basic personality types fall under the D, I, S, and C, which stands for dominating, inspiring, steady, and cautious. Next slide. My behavioral blend falls into the S and C categories. In graph 1, I'm a strong S. In graph 2, I'm a combination of S and C. Next slide. Next slide. Perceptions of my behavioral blend. This falls into 2 categories. I have to deal with what people expect of me versus who I am. And sometimes this can cause internal conflict or anxiety. Because with our performative self, we want to, quote unquote, please people or be who they want us to be. And sometimes this can go against who I see myself as. Next slide. The background information that influences my behavioral blend. The three things that I feel have the greatest influence on my behavioral blend are that I'm naturally shy and reserved, my identity as a Christian, and my cultural identity as an African American. Next slide. The background and behavioral influences on my conversation. These influences have two effects, positive and negative. The positive effect that stands out the most in my own personal view is my personal vision and passion to serve others in the purpose of Christ. Christ is the center of my life. Everything that I desire to do is in Him. Next slide. The negative effects that I feel influence my conversation is my failure to communicate my thoughts and feelings when needed, and I avoid bringing attention to myself. I prefer to blend in. And I have to get out of this because I say, as a Christian, there are times when we have to separate ourselves from the crowd. We can't succumb ourselves to the influence of the world. There are times when we have to stand alone to stand for Christ. Next slide. The potential barriers to my interpersonal context. The most significant barriers or potential barriers to my interpersonal context is that I can be critical of people, and that sometimes I can be prejudging. I can prejudge the person of several others based on characteristics that they show that are familiar with people that I've experienced in the past and have had a negative or positive interaction with. Next slide. What do I need to do to remove the potential barriers to my interpersonal context? The key things that I need to do is to put aside my prejudices, acknowledge and accept each person as unique, refuse to focus on their similarities as compared to people from my past, recognize them in the present, and expound on their individual differences. The next is that I must trust that I am strong enough to withstand disappointment, because disappointment will occur when we disclose ourselves to others. Next slide. Next slide. Noise pollution. Noise pollution falls into two areas, internal and external noise. The most significant internal noise that I have to resolve is the faker/pretend listener. To resolve this, I must be honest to the speaker. I must be willing to let them know that at this point in time, for whatever reason, I am unable to be an effective listener, and possibly try to reschedule a time where we can come back together and I can listen to what they have to say and do it effectively. Next slide. The external noise, to me, the most significant for me is views of outside activity or scenery. If I'm in the faker or pretender mindset, I can be easily distracted. Noise, things going on, other activity. I might be looking at this person in the face, but my mind would be somewhere else. So to resolve this, if a lot of activity is going on that's distracting me, then what I would need to do is see if we can move, or I can re-establish my stance, where I can put my back to the noise, put my back to the distractions, and put my focus on the speaker. Next slide. My action plan. The three key things that I must do in my action plan is first, start the process at home. Then use effective communication as a predictor of relationship satisfaction with my spouse. And third, and most importantly, trust God in the process. My conclusion. Learning that conversation is a relationship caused me to reevaluate my thoughts regarding the process of communicating. For years, I acknowledged the power of spoken words. I acknowledged the power of spoken words with focus on what I say and how I say it. My view of conversation was one-sided. The revelation that conversation and relationship are two sides of the same coin caused me to reflect on past relationships that failed. And with hindsight, I can see a consistent pattern. As the conversation died, so did the relationship. Now my goal is to take and implement what I've learned in this course and become a level 1 listener in all of my relationships. I also desire to utilize the strengths identified in my behavioral blend to grow stronger in my spiritual walk. And as with everything that I learned from these courses, I submit to the Lord that He may better use me for His glory. Thank you, and God bless.